Welcome back. So the pledges of money for the Palestinians are rolling in from the Paris conference, but with control of the Palestinian territories split between two factions, it's hard to see how the money will reach some of the neediest in Gaza. Dr. Medhat Abbas from the Health Ministry in Gaza spoke to Al Jazeera on Monday. For him, the solution cannot be reached by money alone.
I think the problem is that they are meeting today and they are discussing how they could support the Palestinians financially. But what are the plans which are decided already by the Ramallah government to Gaza? This is a very big question mark. And how will the Israelis allow these assistances to pass to the Palestinians inside Gaza? This is another important question to be asked. So it's not only a pure, as what's mentioned now in this interview, that it's not purely financial. The problem is mainly political, and what the consequences of this political siege that we're suffering is much more important. It's not only the financial problem, I think.
Indeed it isn't. There are complicated political circumstances which hang over the Strip, not least of all the fact that it's effectively controlled by the Israelis. There's also the fact that Gaza fell under the control of the Hamas movement in June, isolating 1.5 million Gaza residents from the Fatah-controlled West Bank. But Israel still maintains its stranglehold, controlling land, routes, airspace and access from the sea. In October, an Israeli fuel blockade brought Gaza to near crisis. On top of that, Israeli military incursions into Gaza are common. In fact, since the Annapolis conference, at least 40 Gazans have been killed in Israeli raids. And with 80% living below the poverty line and 44% unemployed, Gazans are certainly among the neediest. Still with us, our guest, Samir Halele, former Cabinet Secretary General and Chief of Staff in the Palestinian Authority, now an economist in Cairo. Abdallah Schleifer, Middle East expert and professor at the American University in Cairo. And of course in London, Abdul Bari Atwan, the editor of the Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper. Gentlemen, thank you for staying with us. So if Gaza is the big problem, why has no effort been made to engage the people who control Gaza? Samir Halele.
This is a political process. It's not related to the dynamics of Paris as a donor meeting. And I think that this political process has to start, has to be initiated. If not, it is initiated. And I think, of course, this has to be the framework for any action for this government in Gaza. However, till this is solved, till this conclusion is met, I think there is an obligation on our government, on Salam Fayyad and Abu Mazen, to be responsible for the citizens of Gaza, even under this siege, and even with the opposition of Hamas government to their legitimacy there. And that basically opposition should not and does not really prevent them from some kinds of acts that could make the survival of the Gazans possible and attainable under the circumstances. So I think there are projects and programs.
Abdul Bari Atwan in London, what strikes me is that Hamas has always and maybe always will have the opportunity to do something about the situation in Gaza. Samir Halele talks about the political process. Hamas could take the initiative. Does that demonstrate a sort of element of political immaturity on their part?
To be honest, we are asking Hamas to do things which they cannot do. The problem is not only Hamas. The problem is Mahmoud Abbas himself. Hamas offered a lot of solutions, a lot of getaways from this situation, but Mahmoud Abbas refused any talks to Hamas. So I believe there are two scenarios for the situation in Gaza. First, either Mr. Abbas to talk to Hamas and reach a reconciliation and start to engage Hamas and the Gaza Strip with the political process again, or actually there will be an Israeli, the second scenario, there will be an Israeli incursion to put an end or root out Hamas rule in Gaza. I believe the first scenario until now is impossible because the American and the Israeli are saying to Abbas, look, either to talk to us or to talk to Hamas. And this is a huge dilemma for the Palestinian people. There is a big veto on Hamas. So this is the problem. As long as the American and the Israeli put this veto in any talks with Hamas, any reconciliation among the Palestinian people, the Palestinian also political parties, I think in the end, the people in Gaza will be suffocated. The unemployment is 60%. The people literally starving. The Israeli are cutting short the electricity, water supplies. So, and closing the border crossing in Rafah and in north of Gaza, Eretz. So this is the dilemma that Americans who are talking about Gaza, they should take, you know, the first step, the first initiative, saying we cannot starve 1.5 million people to death. We cannot strangle those people forever. We cannot, you know, prevent them from going for treatment, for education outside Gaza Strip.
So Abdul Bari Atwan says,
you know, I'm scared. Yeah, the Israeli will send their tanks to Gaza, and this could be, you know, resulted in a massacre, the way they did in Jenin and other parts of the occupied territories.
So Abdul Bari Atwan, as I said, says there that actually one of the major problems is President Abbas himself. Let's just pause for a moment, gentlemen, and have a listen to something that President Abbas said on Monday in Paris.
We will continue to perform our obligations without exception towards the Gaza Strip and the Gazans. Both the Strip and the Gazans themselves form an integral part of our land and people. Any drop of blood or any tear shed in the Gaza Strip is our responsibility.
You heard the words of the man, our responsibility. Abdallah Schleifer in Cairo, what do you think of that? Do you think he's genuine when he says that?
Well, on a rhetorical basis, it's a very moving statement, and on a certain level of emotion, I think he is sincere. But the point is, the words themselves mean nothing if there isn't a structure to implement it. And that structure is only going to come about if Fatah and Hamas can agree to a structure to restore the situation. Now, I don't think the starting point are the Americans. Or the Israelis. I think instead the starting point is a Arab League initiative. Just as, look, the most successful thing that ever happened between Fatah and Hamas after the elections that brought Hamas to power was when the Saudis intervened. And I think the time now is most appropriate for again the Saudis to intervene and to create a formula where both sides make concessions. Abu Abbas is not simply saying no, he's setting certain conditions. And of course, Hamas will have certain conditions, and that is a return to the status before the troubles in Gaza and the Hamas takeover. So I think if you have a major Arab intervention by Saudi Arabia with backup from other moderate Arab states, the United States has to take note of it, particularly since I think the administration at this moment in its time with the clock ticking would really like to see some progress made, because they're not making progress anywhere else in their agenda, and there's hope here, even though the situation seems dire.
Abdul Bari Atwan's shaking his head there in London. I wonder why that is.
Dr. Abdullah is saying the right stuff, but the problem is, you know, Saudi Arabia completely powerless without the blessing of the United States. We have to remember in June this year, actually, the Saudi managed to find a code between Hamas and Fatah to set up the national unity government and reconciliation between the two sides. But what happened? The American imposed veto on this government. They refused to deal with any government headed by Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. So I believe even if the Arab government intervened and reached some sort of a settlement, reconciliation between Fatah and Hamas, the American and the Israeli will raise their veto again. So it is, the problem is Hamas is not wanted, is not going to be dealt with by the American and by the Israeli. So this is the major obstacle here. So we have to say to the American, okay, we want guaranteed from the American and the Israeli, if a country like Saudi Arabia intervened and reached another accord, reconciliation accord between Hamas and Fatah, to be respected, and the sanction to be left on the people in Gaza. That's the major obstacle. So the Arab League is there and ready to do so. The Saudi Arabia will volunteer again and reach some sort of an agreement, but whether the Israeli and the American accept it, I doubt.
Okay, final word to Samir Khalele in Ramallah. We've got about a minute left now. We've heard a suggestion there about the Arab League or Saudi Arabia getting involved. Do you actually envisage Fatah and Hamas in some way or the other engaging each other again soon?
I'm not sure about soon, because it needs first a maturity within Hamas itself, and I think Hamas within the Gaza Strip are not yet mature for that. They are not ready to meet not just the conditions, but the basic requirements for having these talks successful. And I think the regional component is not ready yet. The issue related to Iran and Syria and their role vis-a-vis Hamas and the Gaza. I think we are in the right process, but we are not there yet, and it will need more time.
My thanks to all our guests here in Inside Story: Samir Halele in Ramallah, Abdullah Schleifer in Cairo, and Abdul Bari Atwan in London. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and of course to you, the viewer, thank you for joining us here on this edition of Inside Story. We welcome your comments, your suggestions. As always, you can email them to the address on screen, insidestory@aljazeera.net. That's it from us for now. Thanks for watching.